On a rainy spring night in 2024, deputies from the Scott County Sheriff's Office responded to a car crash 7 miles north of downtown Davenport, Iowa. A driver had struck a pole. Thankfully, no one was injured. What appeared to be a standard case of driving under the influence, however, quickly took a darker and more disturbing turn. As the driver began to sober up, he slowly began remembering and talking. Deputies were horrified by what he had to say. Hi there, I'm Kevin and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. In today's case, we're returning to Iowa, where a shocking turn of events led deputies to a gruesome murder scene in a Parkview apartment complex. No one can know for certain what took place inside of that apartment in the spring of 2024, though prosecutors believe that the accused gave away just enough information to piece it all together. Let's take a look. At 1:47 a.m. on March 13, 2024, Lieutenant Thomas Leonard of the Scott County Sheriff's Office was called out to the scene of a car crash near to the entrance of Davenport Municipal Airport. A caller had notified police that a silver Impala had struck a concrete median before crashing into a light pole. When the lieutenant arrived at the scene, he found the driver of the vehicle beginning to regain consciousness. The man appeared uninjured, but incoherent. The strong and distinct smell of alcohol emanated from the vehicle and its driver.
Buddy, can you look at me? Are you alright?
Yeah.
You're in an accident. Do you know that?
No.
Where were you heading to? Do you know where you're at all or anything?
Yeah, auditorium.
Wait, where were you heading, you think?
The auditorium.
The auditorium?
Yeah.
What's your name?
Chris Ian.
Chris? Chris Ian?
Chris Levy.
Oh, okay.
31-year-old local resident Christopher B. Hall was unable to explain to Lieutenant Leonard where he was or where he had come from. At one point, he suggested that he was at the hospital.
All right. But you say you don't remember where you were coming from?
Nope.
Not at all?
Nope.
Girlfriend's house, your house, anybody's house?
Not really sure.
Okay. So do you know where you're at right now?
Hospital, I'm pretty sure.
Your hospital is where you're thinking at?
That's what I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
You're over by the airport.
Oh, okay.
Do you know how you got there?
Nope.
No? Okay. All right. He said his name's Chris? Yeah. It's him.
While attempting to ascertain if Chris had any injuries, the lieutenant looked inside the car for items of interest. There were no visible liquor bottles and no signs of drug use, though he did spot an item of concern near to Chris's bare feet, a knife.
So where are you bleeding at down here? Your foot's all got blood on it. Where's your shoes at? Do you know where your shoes are at?
No.
Okay. Did you just jump in the vehicle from...
Yeah.
Where'd you leave from then?
Not sure.
Not sure? All right. When you get... why is there's a knife down by your foot, so I want to make sure I move that, okay? So.
It was raining heavily with blistering winds on the roadside. Lieutenant Leonard removed the knife from the vehicle and placed it on top of the car. As the rain beat down, blood rinsed off of the blade. Chris appeared to have a cut, not a significant one, to his side. Officers on scene speculated, based on his condition, that this small injury was accidental. There was no reason, at that time, for further concern. The registration on the silver Impala listed Chris B. Hall as its owner. Deputies located his address at the Crestview apartment complex in Parkview. Chris lived with his girlfriend, 31-year-old Taylor Escontrias.
Sheriff's Office.
Deputy Turner knocked on the door but received no answer. There was no sound coming from inside the apartment. The phone number located for Taylor, when called, went unanswered. From the exterior of the unit, there was nothing to raise suspicion. The deputy did not attempt to enter. He instead drove back towards Davenport to the hospital, where Chris had been taken for treatment of his minor cuts, and to address what appeared to be a case of excessive alcohol consumption. At the hospital, Chris was read his rights. The deputy also performed a sobriety test. He used a vertical gaze nystagmus, or VGN test, which requires observing the subject for jerking eye movements as they follow a stimulus moving up and down. The head remains still.
Just keep your head still and look straight at my finger, okay? You think that's about a foot away from your face? Give or take a couple inches?
At first, Chris struggled not to move his head as instructed.
Keep your head still for me.
When he was able to follow instructions, the deputy noted signs of inebriation. A blood alcohol test would later return a result of 0.3. The legal limit is 0.08. Doctors found no serious injuries, no impact to his head, and no concussion. He was diagnosed only with alcohol intoxication, the cut to his side, and having slightly low levels of potassium. Chris's communication was improving, but his memory was not.
Do you know how you... So there was a knife. I know you just... Sorry, I'm getting... My ears getting...
There was a knife, and I don't really know how it got in the car, but like I know there was a reason why it was in the car.
Yeah.
But it was...
As Deputy Turner inquired further about the knife, Chris began to ask questions as well. Was there blood on his hands when they brought him into the hospital? Had the deputy checked on his girlfriend, Taylor? She wouldn't have answered in the middle of the night, he said, but he began to insist that deputies return to the apartment to check on her, to see if she was alive.
Okay, that's why I really need to ask you. I need to make sure she was alive.
We went there and knocked and she didn't answer. We know the door code and everything. Thank you. What makes you concerned that she's not?
I don't know.
Okay.
Something in my mind makes me feel like I did something. I don't think I would have ever done anything like that to her. Because I'm not like that.
Were you guys having a fight earlier today?
No.
Okay.
But
Is it just kind of some thoughts you're having just because we know she didn't answer yet?
I'm really fucking scared that I have these pictures in my head that like I beat her with a baseball bat.
Okay.
And like I know that's incriminating myself, but
Well, at this point it's for the safety of everyone involved.
I need to make sure that she's okay.
Nope, I can send another deputy up there to see if we can go check for her, okay? Let me get a hold of my boss and just have him go up there and check on her. I'm sure she's okay.
You good? What's going on?
He might have killed his girlfriend. I don't know yet.
What do you mean? What?
He just told me he said, I need to know if she's alive. I said, what are you talking about? We just tried to go knock. He gave me his address and the door code. Hang on. He said he gave me the address and the door code, and he said images are going through my head of me beating her to death with a baseball bat.
Lieutenant Leonard met the deputy back at the Crestview Apartments. This time, they tried the door to Unit 4 and found it unlocked. There was, however, resistance from something blocking the entrance on the other side as they opened it. That resistance was caused by Taylor. Just inside the threshold in the doorway, they discovered the young mother. She was deceased, the victim of what appeared to be a brutal attack inside the home. She had sustained injuries from a bat, a knife, and a screwdriver, nearly 60 in total. The area of the struggle was not isolated to one location inside the two-bedroom apartment. There were signs that Taylor had been injured in multiple locations: in the hallway, the kitchen, the living room, and finally, at the doorway. A bloodied baseball bat was on the couch. In the kitchen, law enforcement found the tip of a screwdriver next to the sink. They had already recovered the knife. Though some of the blood had washed away in the rain, DNA testing of a sample was able to confirm a match to Taylor from the blade. Taylor was the daughter of parents Michael McKee and Lisa Rosenberg. She was born and raised in Davenport, Iowa, and had attended Rock Ridge High School. She was the mother to 2 children, Lila and Julian. Taylor has been described as a beautiful soul known for her caring nature, her sense of humor, and artistic talents. Her mother recalled, "Taylor was amazing. She was spunky. She was unique." Family also remembers her as a very honest person. Taylor loved a good laugh, she adored cooking, and she embraced time with family and friends. Unfortunately, the 31-year-old also struggled with addiction throughout her adult life. It was through her treatment that Taylor had encountered Christopher Behal, a sometimes employed machine operator, also from Davenport. The two met while in a program for alcohol addiction at Country Oaks, a rehabilitation facility in Buffalo. While in rehab, they attended daily courses, addressed their addiction, and developed their friendship. Their relationship slowly grew into a romantic one, announcing they were a couple in October 2023. They had also moved in together. The day following the completion of their program at Country Oaks, both Chris and Taylor broke their sobriety and were drinking again. Inside the Crestview apartment, detectives found only scattered clues indicating what had taken place in the moments before Taylor was violently attacked. Away from the living room and kitchen area, much of the apartment showed no signs of the murder. A spare room held storage items in totes. 2 closets in the bedroom contained nothing of value. There were items on nightstands and a bag on the floor. The bathroom showed no signs of a cleanup. Though in the main bedroom, next to a pillow on the bed, was a gallon bottle of Hawkeye vodka. It appeared to be empty. A small blood stain was visible on the top sheet. It was likely a transfer, perhaps from a finger. The cap to the vodka bottle was also on the bed, as well as a cell phone. It was owned by Chris. A second cell phone, Taylor's, was located in the kitchen. On the night she died, Taylor reached out on Facebook Messenger to 2 friends. She asked Michael Holan if he could drive over to her home and collect her. It was a favor that he had performed for Taylor more than once in the past. Michael spoke directly with Taylor that night and described her as emotional. He suspected that she had been drinking. Michael had also consumed a couple of drinks and so rightly refused to get behind the wheel. So he looked up an Uber to send to Taylor, but the cost, $150 for the trip to his place, was unaffordable. He got off the phone promising to come and get her the next day. But he said she never called him in the morning to confirm, as they had agreed. He learned of the news of her death that afternoon. Taylor's second call for help was to an old high school classmate named Nick Seaman. It was past 11 o'clock when she sent him the message. Nick did not see it until the following morning at around 7 a.m. Taylor wrote, "If I get killed, it was Chris," followed by, "Don't reply right now. He's nuts." Despite this prophetic message, Taylor never dialed 911. Christopher Behal was arrested while still in the hospital. He was processed and then brought to the station to sit down with detectives. He was sober by the time he was questioned. Without an attorney, Chris began to offer scattered recollections. Over the course of a few hours, he would tell 2 different versions of events. He said the 2 were playing a card game called Garbage when Taylor began experiencing what he called an emotional breakdown. He managed to calm her, and the 2 lay down on the bed together to talk. In this version, Chris could not recall anything between the time they spoke in the bedroom and the attack at the doorway with the baseball bat.
And then we both kind of laid down, and then she started freaking out again. And she went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, came in the what she was doing with it at first, and she was just kind of freaking out. I tried to take it from her, and then she ran out of the kid's living room. And I don't know how much of this next part is true or false, but I remember grabbing the baseball bat and hitting her with it. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know what happened from the time that we went to bed to the time that I hit her with the baseball bat. We came inside and we were talking. We lay down, we were still talking. And the next thing I remember is hitting her with a baseball bat.
He could not recall the exact sequence of events, only bits and pieces. When it was over, he just left.
All I know is I think I was debating about just going and laying down or grabbing my keys and leaving, so I must have grabbed my keys and left, and that's the last thing I remember before waking up in the hospital.
Chris could not tell detectives what had instigated the attack against Taylor, though he offered that the couple did have problems and that Taylor often made him feel like shit.
And she always kind of made it seem like I wasn't a part of this relationship, and she had said earlier that day that it's a one-sided relationship. And she always talks shit and, makes me feel like shit, but I loved her. So I just was trying to work on things with her.
Detectives left Chris alone in the room for some time while they strategized and decided how to proceed. Chris's recollections to that point did not match the evidence at the scene. Specifically, he did not account for evidence in the kitchen or in the hallway that suggested the attack started elsewhere and moved throughout the unit, finally ending at the doorway. He recalled only a brief encounter with the knife, namely when he was cut on the side. He did not remember a screwdriver at all.
I've been drinking has ruined my entire life. Why would I ever fucking kill her? Obviously because of the alcohol. But why? Like, literally, why? We drank I don't know how many times before. I've never done this. Why now? Why would I do this?
When detectives returned, they pressured Chris to fill in the gaps. At that point, he began to speculate. Maybe he stabbed her at the doorway to put her out of her misery after the initial attack had gone too far. He suggested that this could have been what happened. His memory from that night was mostly a blur until he awoke in the hospital.
Have you remembered anything else while you've been sitting here? I wish I could. I don't know what the fuck happened, why it happened.
To believe everything that you've said. There's just still a couple of things that aren't really lining up. So there's multiple staff names that are not just the same.
Okay.
Is there any reason that there would be any blood on anything else other than a knife?
In the baseball bat.
A knife and a baseball bat.
Other than that, I have no idea. I have no reason to believe there would be, but I couldn't tell you because I have no idea.
About a screwdriver.
I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but I couldn't tell you. I honestly don't remember anything about a screwdriver.
Christopher B. Hall stood trial for first-degree murder, a charge that requires the state to prove that he acted with malice and forethought. His defense essentially conceded the key elements of the crime. He had killed Taylor. The medical examiner had found one of the many blows she sustained had killed her, but could not state definitively which one. Chris had been, however, blackout drunk, or at least he claimed to have been. His team argued that he did not possess the mental capacity to form intent or forethought to willfully commit the murder. He was simply too intoxicated. Nonetheless, the jury would decide if he had committed first-degree murder. In a strange and perhaps unnecessary analogy, public defender Leanne Striegel opened by telling jurors about the life and biography of Tina Turner. She went on to explain Tina's reasoning for not attending her mother's funeral. It was not, as many people had thought, because Tina did not love or respect her mother, but quite the opposite. Basically, the stretched analogy concluded that establishing the intent behind an action is complicated.
One of the state's requirements is to prove the intention of Mr. Behal. Intention is very difficult to prove. Getting inside this mind of somebody. Just like getting inside of the mind of Tina Turner and why she would choose not to go to her mother's funeral.
That there was no evidence of Chris planning the murder, nor any indication of a cover-up, does not mean that he did not contemplate his actions, and there was no requirement that he remember his crime in order to be convicted of it. The number of injuries Taylor sustained indicated the length of time that the attack had lasted, allowing for many opportunities to pause and stop the attack entirely. Each injury was a decision that Chris made. The jury could also infer malice and deliberation by his use of 3 weapons: the bat, the knife, and the screwdriver. Though these were all items sourced from within the apartment, he still needed to switch out the implement he was using at least twice throughout the course of the attack. Finally, the physical evidence showed the incident occurred across multiple locations within the apartment, requiring movement from one area to another. These movements are further proof that the murder was deliberate and willful. He also had the presence of mind to leave the scene of the crime after the fact, an indication that he was aware of what he had done. Dr. Dennis Klein, the medical examiner that performed the autopsy on Taylor, testified that her cause of death was multiple blunt force injuries. There were 2 opposing views that emerged from the doctor's testimony. In the state's view, Taylor's death was the result of a culmination of her injuries. He could not pinpoint the fatal blow. The state emphasized the location of the wounds caused by the knife, those that Chris had speculated that he delivered last by the doorway. But the doctor also told the jury that some of Taylor's impact wounds could have been caused by a fall. There was no way, medically, to rule this out. He also confirmed that Taylor's toxicology returned a blood alcohol level of 0.338, which would have rendered her physically unstable. In such a scenario, it was plausible, the defense would argue, that even a single initial blow could have caused her death. All of the subsequent injuries after the fact were then irrelevant to the murder charge, and the implied intent of delivering each individual blow would also be irrelevant. Chris took the stand to testify in his defense. It was perhaps his best and only chance to frame the crime as one of passion, not contemplation. Under oath, he changed his story yet again. He no longer remembered using the knife. His speculation about why he used this weapon to deliver the final blows to Taylor had been a key element in his interrogation. 1 year later, Chris had managed to forget key details.
The last thing that I remember is laying down to go to bed with her. Or not laying down to go to bed, but laying down in bed talking to her. Is the last thing that I consciously remember doing.
You said you remember Taylor getting a knife, you tried to take it away from her, she sliced you or slashed you with it, and you shoved her into a wall before getting the baseball bat.
Correct.
None of that was true.
No.
You made it up.
Correct.
Okay. But you did hit Taylor with a baseball bat.
As far as memory goes, yes.
When you hit her with that bat, Taylor was facing away from you?
As far as memory I can construe
Sorry, I apologize. As far as my memory withstands, yes.
When you told Detective Rowling that you remembered stabbing Taylor, did you remember stabbing Taylor?
At the time, yes.
And you told Detective Rowling you couldn't say why you stabbed her,
Correct.
but you thought maybe it was because Taylor was still moving and you might as well put her out of her misery given how much damage you'd already done to her.
Correct, that was what was said.
In closing, Chris's lead attorney, Miguel Puentes, applied another strange analogy. Counter to what the state was arguing, each of Taylor's nearly 60 wounds were not the result of 60 separate, deliberate decisions made by Chris Behal. Instead, he said that some actions just keep going as one continuous decision. It is like walking or eating. Of course, in this case, it was murder.
So I just want you to think of just an activity. Any activity. Doesn't matter what it is. And the question is like, once you're in it, are you just in it? Like, are you just doing it? Or are you kind of like, are you considering, are you then contemplating and recontemplating every step in that process? We'll treat it like a walk in the park, right? Are you contemplating each step, or did you contemplate the walk and then every step is not being deliberated and is not being premeditated? That is just happening. That is in the action that you're already in. Another example is just eating food, each bite. Are you contemplating each time, or are you just doing?
Puentes finished by suggesting that the murder technically happened quickly, where the trail in the apartment indicated the attack had started, in the kitchen. He asserted that there was no indication that Taylor was moving around the apartment after that point, independently.
I think the incident happened in the kitchen. I think she died in the kitchen. I think that that's what the evidence supports. I think it happened fast, and again, I think it happened in the kitchen. Now, any offenses that occur after someone is deceased is not murder in the first, murder in the second, voluntary or involuntary. It's just not. You can't form intent after the fact. That is a separate crime and a crime that has not been charged.
Scott County Assistant Attorney Brett Larson told jurors that there was no evidence to support that theory of the crime, though there was an abundance of signs at the scene that the murder had taken place as they posited. Indeed, as Chris's second version offered to detectives had outlined. When pressed, Chris speculated about his actions and the reasons behind them. When he told detectives that he might have stabbed Taylor to put her out of her misery, Larson said, "That's the defendant telling you that he stabbed her to put her out of her misery."
That version of events, that story, that makes sense based on the evidence you've seen in this case? It doesn't. What story does make sense? The story, or what the defendant told Detective Rowling after he came clean and said, "Oh, the first story, I made all that up." After that point, what the defendant told you was what happened. That story matches up with the physical evidence that we see on scene.
The jury returned with their verdict after less than 2 hours of deliberation.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of domestic abuse, assault, with the intent to inflict serious injury. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your service as jurors. I would assume the defense would like the jury polled.
The conviction for first-degree murder comes with an automatic life sentence without the possibility of parole. This sentence will be handed down to Christopher Behal at a hearing currently scheduled for May 30th, 2025. There are 2 family members, including Taylor's mother, Lisa, who are expected to deliver impact statements at that hearing.
One day at a time, lots of prayers. I have a lot of support. We have a lot of support in our family. You know, we got family and friends that have been wonderful through this whole thing. And prayer, a lot of prayer.
That was the tragic case of Taylor Escontrias. Thank you for joining me, and a special thanks this week to Lemiz, Just T, and Meg Miller for joining our Members Lounge. Your extra support is greatly appreciated. I'm Kevin. This is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.
Keeping it objective, always been effective. Can say he got a knack. Pick of the litter, you see how Newton got his back. Yeah, the content that you need, this could be a new sign. We talking the comments, they jotting the